I'm Morgan, 32, a remote software developer who thought family meant safety. Living with my brother Ethan and his wife Tiffany seemed perfect until my bank statements revealed a shocking betrayal. Someone was siphoning $1,300 monthly from my accounts. Never did I imagine the person stealing from me was sleeping under the same roof, using my trust as a weapon against me. The person I welcomed into my home had been methodically robbing me blind for almost a year. Before I dive into how my sister-in-law stole thousands from me while living under the same roof, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had family betray your trust. My journey to becoming a software developer wasn't easy. After graduating with a computer science degree, I spent 3 years job hopping between startups that either couldn't afford to keep me or folded entirely. Finally, at 29, I landed a position with TechSphere, a prestigious company that allowed me to work remotely full-time. The salary was incredible compared to my previous jobs, starting at $85,000 with generous benefits and quarterly bonuses based on performance. Around the same time I secured this dream job, my brother Ethan hit a rough patch. He works in construction, and when the housing market slowed down, his hours were cut dramatically. His wife, Tiffany, had just been laid off from her administrative position at a local company that was downsizing. They were 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. "It's just temporary, Morgan," Ethan assured me during a particularly emotional phone call. "We just need a few months to get back on our feet." My 2-bedroom apartment had plenty of space, and I'd always been close with my brother. We'd grown up practically inseparable despite our 2-year age gap. He'd protected me from bullies in school, and I'd helped him pass his math classes. It seemed natural to offer them my spare room. "You can stay as long as you need," I told them. "We're family." The first few months were surprisingly harmonious. Tiffany kept the place spotless, often having dinner ready when I emerged from my home office. Ethan contributed what he could financially when he got jobs, and they both seemed genuinely grateful. We'd have movie nights together, and Tiffany would often ask thoughtful questions about my day. "Your job sounds so fascinating," she'd say, leaning forward with interest. "I wish I understood more about what you do." My work routine was consistent. Online by 8 a.m., meetings throughout the day, coding sessions, and usually wrapping up around 6 p.m. I was meticulous about my finances, automatically directing 30% of my income to savings and investments. The rest covered living expenses with enough left over for occasional treats and helping Ethan and Tiffany when necessary. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. Tiffany started lingering near my home office, asking increasingly specific questions about my work systems. At first, I thought she was just being friendly, or maybe even interested in changing careers. "How does your company handle payments for remote workers?" she asked once while bringing me coffee. "Do you need to log in every day for the system to recognize your hours? Is your work email separate from your banking information?" I answered everything openly. Why wouldn't I? She was family now. As my career progressed, I received 2 raises within 18 months, bringing my annual salary to $96,000. I didn't flaunt my success, but I didn't hide it either. Looking back, I wonder if that's when something shifted in Tiffany. She'd always been charming and supportive on the surface, complimenting my achievements and seeming genuinely happy for me. But occasionally, I'd catch a flash of something in her eyes when I mentioned work victories. A tightness around her mouth when I talked about my latest bonus. Ethan and I had always been close, sharing everything growing up. He seemed genuinely happy about my success, often bragging about his genius sister to his friends. But I noticed he became quieter when Tiffany was around, less enthusiastic about my accomplishments. The arrangement continued for over a year. They saved some money, but never quite enough to move out. There was always some new expense, car repairs, medical bills, or simply not enough consistent work for Ethan. I didn't mind. I enjoyed the company most of the time, and my job was going so well that the financial burden wasn't significant. Then came the moment that set everything in motion. Tiffany needed to print some job application documents urgently while I was in a meeting. "Can I use your computer real quick? Mine just died, and these applications are due today," she asked, looking distressed. I nodded, muted my video call, and quickly logged her into my personal profile. "Thanks, Morgan." "You're a lifesaver," she said. It never occurred to me that this simple act of kindness would be the beginning of my undoing. The first sign something was wrong came during my quarterly financial review. I'd gotten into the habit of checking all my accounts every 3 months, updating my budget spreadsheet, and adjusting investments as needed. That April evening, the numbers weren't adding up. According to my calculations, I should have had about $4,000 more in my checking account than was showing up. I assumed I'd made a mistake, so I went through my spending line by line. Nothing unusual appeared at first. My regular bills, some Amazon purchases, grocery deliveries, and a few dinners out. "That's weird," I muttered to myself, cross-referencing my bank statements with my budget tracker. I dug deeper into my transaction history and noticed something odd. Small transfers between $200 to $300 to an account I didn't recognize, happening every few days. They'd been going on for months, but because they were relatively small and scattered between legitimate expenses, I hadn't noticed them during my casual account check-ins. My heart started racing. I called my bank immediately. "Can you tell me where these transfers are going?" I asked the representative, trying to keep my voice steady. "It appears to be another account within our bank system," she said. "The transfers were authorized through your online banking profile." "But I didn't authorize them," I insisted. The representative walked me through security protocols and eventually gave me a case number for the fraud investigation. But something about this didn't feel like typical fraud. The transfers were too regular, too calculated, as if someone knew exactly how much they could take without setting off immediate alarms. I hung up and opened my email, searching for bank notifications about these transfers. They were all there, buried among hundreds of work emails, all marked as read, though I had no memory of seeing them. That's when a chill ran down my spine. I checked my work email and found several exchanges I didn't recognize. They were minor communications with HR and accounting, small task confirmations, requests for clarification on projects, and most disturbing, an email from 6 months ago confirming a change in how part of my compensation would be distributed. According to this email thread I had supposedly participated in, I had requested that $1,300 of my monthly income be directed to a family support account. The emails were written in a style similar to mine, using phrases I commonly use. Someone had been impersonating me, and they knew me well enough to be convincing. My hands shaking, I dug further into my computer. In my password manager, I found that someone had accessed it repeatedly over the past year. Many of my security questions had been changed to answers that a family member would know. My recovery phone number had been changed to one I didn't recognize. The evidence was mounting, and it all pointed in one direction: Tiffany. I found PDF copies of bank statements in a hidden folder on my computer, statements for an account in Tiffany's name showing regular deposits matching the amounts missing from my account. She hadn't even tried to hide it well, probably assuming I'd never looked that deeply into my files. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tiffany had been systematically stealing from me for almost a year. By my calculations, she'd taken over $15,000. She had used my computer access to set up transfers, intercept my banking notifications, and even communicate with my company to redirect part of my salary. I felt violated in a way I'd never experienced before. This wasn't a random thief. This was someone I'd welcomed into my home, someone I'd trusted implicitly. She'd sat across from me at dinner, looked me in the eye, and accepted my generosity while secretly draining my accounts. The anger came in waves, followed by crushing disappointment and humiliation. How could I have been so blind? So stupid? So trusting? I spent the entire night gathering evidence, screenshots, bank records, email threads, everything I could find that proved what she'd been doing. I organized it all into a folder, made backups, and prepared myself for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult confrontation of my life. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. This couldn't continue for another day. I had to confront Tiffany, and I had to do it now. I waited until Ethan left for work. I didn't want to ambush them both at once, and some part of me hoped that Tiffany might be more honest without my brother present to witness her humiliation. I rehearsed what I would say, trying to remain calm and factual despite the rage and betrayal boiling inside me. Tiffany was in the kitchen making coffee when I emerged from my room, evidence folder in hand. "Morning," she said cheerfully. "Want some coffee? I'm trying that vanilla bean creamer you like." The casual normality of the moment made me feel sick. How many mornings had she greeted me like this, playing the role of thoughtful sister-in-law while secretly stealing from me? "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know what you've been doing, Tiffany." Her smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I placed the folder on the kitchen table and opened it to reveal the first bank statement. "I know you've been transferring money from my accounts to yours. I know you've been redirecting part of my salary. I have all the evidence right here." Her expression shifted rapidly, surprise, then fear, then something harder to read. She set down her coffee mug slowly. "You must be mistaken," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. $1,300 a month, Tiffany. For almost a year. That's over $15,000 you've stolen from me." I pulled out more documents. "Here are the transfers. Here are the emails you sent pretending to be me. Here's your bank account showing the deposits." She stared at the evidence for a long moment, then her demeanor changed completely. The friendly mask dropped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "So, what if I did?" she finally said, crossing her arms. "After everything we've done for you?" I was stunned. "Everything you've done for me? I took you in. I've been supporting you both. You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your big salary," she spat. "Some of us haven't had your advantages. You owe us for all the times Ethan looked out for you growing up. That doesn't give you the right to steal from me." I was shouting now, my carefully planned calm approach abandoned. "It's not stealing when it's family," she insisted. "We needed that money. You had plenty. You wouldn't even notice if you weren't so obsessed with your spreadsheets and budgets." The conversation deteriorated rapidly. Every justification she offered made less sense than the last. According to Tiffany, I was selfish for not offering more financial support. My success was partly due to Ethan's protection when we were kids. I owed them for keeping the house clean and cooking meals. The mental gymnastics were astounding. "I want every penny back," I demanded. "And you need to find somewhere else to live. I want you out of my house." That's when she exploded. "This is our house too. We've been living here for over a year. We have rights." "Rights to what? To steal from me? To betray my trust?" "Stop interfering in our lives," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "If you can't handle sharing what you have, then you leave the house." We were at a standoff, both of us breathing hard, when the front door opened. Ethan was home for lunch. "What the hell is going on?" he asked, looking between us in confusion. "I could hear you shouting from the driveway." Before I could speak, Tiffany rushed to him, tears suddenly streaming down her face. "Morgan is trying to kick us out," she sobbed into his chest. "She says we're taking advantage of her. After everything we've done. After how we've been family to her when she would otherwise be all alone." The transformation was remarkable. In seconds, she'd gone from venomous rage to wounded victim. "Morgan, what the hell?" Ethan looked at me with disappointment. "She's been stealing from me, Ethan," I said, gesturing to the evidence still spread across the table. "Thousands of dollars. Look for yourself." He glanced at the papers but kept his arm around Tiffany. "I'm sure there's some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." She admitted it. "She just doesn't think it counts as stealing because we're family." Tiffany looked up at him, with tear-filled eyes. "I was just trying to help us save enough to get our own place. Morgan makes so much money, and we've been struggling for so long. I didn't think she'd mind if she knew." "But you made sure I didn't know," I pointed out. "You hid the transfers. You intercepted notifications. You impersonated me to my company." Ethan looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Let me see those papers," he finally said. I watched his face as he examined the evidence. I could see the moment realization dawned, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "Tiffany," he said quietly, "did you really do this?" "She's twisting everything," Tiffany insisted, but her voice had lost conviction. I pulled up the most damning evidence, screenshots of Tiffany's own bank account showing the regular deposits that aligned perfectly with the missing funds from mine. Ethan's face went pale. Why? Was all he could ask. Tiffany launched into her justifications again. How I could afford it, how family should share, how she was just trying to secure their future. By stealing? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. By lying? This isn't right, Tiff. We need to pay Morgan back. With what money? Tiffany snapped. We've spent most of it already on bills and things we needed. Things like your new designer purse? I asked. Or those $300 boots you bought last month. Or the weekend trip to Vegas you told me was paid for by your parents. Ethan looked at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. Is that true? Tiffany's defense crumbled into accusations. You're taking her side? After everything? Fine. Why don't you both just gang up on me? Poor little Morgan always needs her big brother to fight her battles. The argument continued in circles, with Tiffany alternating between tearful apologies and vicious attacks. Ethan seemed shell-shocked, caught between his wife and his sister, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the person revealed in those documents. By the end of that horrible afternoon, nothing was resolved. Tiffany refused to admit any real wrongdoing. Ethan couldn't bring himself to fully condemn her actions. And I was left feeling like a stranger in my own home, surrounded by people I no longer recognized or trusted. The days following the confrontation were excruciating. Ethan and Tiffany retreated to their bedroom for hours, their muffled arguments occasionally escalating to shouts before dropping back to tense whispers. I secured my computer with new passwords and enabled two-factor authentication on all my accounts, but the damage was already done. When Ethan finally approached me alone, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. I don't know what to say, Morgan, he began, running his hands through his hair. I can't believe she would do this. But she did, I said flatly. And now I need to know what you're going to do about it. His expression crumpled. She says she can't pay it back right now. We don't have that kind of money saved up. What about all the money she stole from me? Where did it go? Ethan couldn't meet my eyes. Some went to bills, but she spent a lot of it. Clothes, restaurants when I was working late, stuff for her family back home. And you're okay with this? I asked, incredulous. Of course not, he insisted. But she's my wife, Morgan. I can't just throw her out. So, what? I'm just supposed to forget about the $15,000 and move on like nothing happened? He looked miserable. Maybe we could work out a payment plan? A little each month until it's paid back. I laughed bitterly. You really think she's going to stick to that? After everything she's done? The conversation ended in a stalemate. Ethan wanted to believe Tiffany was genuinely remorseful and that they could make amends. I saw no real contrition in her, only regret at being caught. Things escalated when our parents got involved. Mom called me after receiving a tearful call from Tiffany. Morgan, sweetie, what's this I hear about you threatening to evict Ethan and Tiffany? She asked. I was stunned. That's what she told you? Mom, she stole over $15,000 from me. Tiffany says there was a misunderstanding about household contributions, Mom continued. She said you agreed they could use some of your excess income since you make so much more than them. That's absolutely not true, I said, furious that Tiffany was spreading lies to our family. I have proof, Mom. Bank statements, emails, everything. But the damage was done. Tiffany had gotten to my parents first, painting herself as the victim of my supposed greed and rigidity. By the time I could explain my side, they had already formed opinions based on Tiffany's manipulated version of events. Families should support each other, Dad said during a painful video call. Maybe you could be a little more understanding of their situation. Understanding of theft? I asked in disbelief. My cousin Leah was the only family member who unequivocally took my side when she heard what happened. Get out of that house, she advised firmly. They're gaslighting you, Morgan. This is financial abuse. But leaving wasn't simple. This was my apartment. I had built my life and career there. Why should I be the one to leave? Meanwhile, the atmosphere at home became increasingly hostile. Tiffany would make passive-aggressive comments during our rare shared meals. I would offer you some of my dessert, Morgan, but I know how you like to keep track of every little thing that's yours, she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan tried to mediate, but his attempts at peacemaking only made things worse. He suggested a family therapy session, which quickly devolved into Tiffany portraying herself as misunderstood and me as materialistic and unforgiving. I was just trying to help our family, she insisted to the therapist. Morgan has always been possessive about money. Even as kids, she would count her birthday money in front of everyone. It was maddening how she twisted everything, creating a fictional history between us. Tiffany had only been in my life for 3 years. Not since childhood, as she implied. My work began to suffer. I couldn't concentrate knowing Tiffany was in the house, potentially going through my things when I wasn't looking. I started locking my bedroom door and taking my laptop with me everywhere, even to the bathroom. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and had a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. The final straw came 6 weeks after the initial confrontation. Ethan approached me with what he clearly thought was a reasonable solution. Tiffany's really struggling with all this, Morgan, he said. Her anxiety is through the roof with this hanging over her head. My heart bleeds, I replied sarcastically. He winced. Look, we've talked it over and we think the best thing for everyone would be to just let this go. For family harmony. I stared at him in disbelief. Let it go. She stole $15,000 from me, Ethan. And that was wrong, he said quickly. Nobody's denying that. But holding on to this anger isn't healthy for any of us. Tiffany's agreed to help more around the house to make it up to you. Make it up to me? By doing chores? Are you serious right now? We're family, Morgan, he pleaded. Sometimes that means forgiveness. In that moment, I realized how thoroughly Tiffany had manipulated my brother. He couldn't even see how absurd his suggestion was. And more importantly, I realized that as long as I stayed in that house, nothing would change. Tiffany would never face real consequences. Ethan would never truly stand up to her. And I would continue to be cast as the villain for having the audacity to demand justice. Something broke inside me that day, the last thread of hope that my family would eventually see the situation clearly and stand by me. I looked at my brother, this person I'd loved and trusted all my life, and saw a stranger. Okay, Ethan, I said quietly. I've heard enough. That night, I made my decision. If they wouldn't leave, I would. And I would make sure Tiffany couldn't hurt me again. Once I decided to leave, a strange calm replaced the anxiety that had plagued me for weeks. I had a plan now, a direction, a way out of this toxic situation. First, I needed somewhere to go. My friend Leah had offered her spare room, but I knew that was only a temporary solution. I wanted a clean break, a fresh start where neither Ethan nor Tiffany could easily find me. I researched apartments across town, far from my current neighborhood, but still within commuting distance to the occasional in-office days my job required. I found a modern one-bedroom in a secure building with underground parking and a doorman, security features that suddenly seemed essential. Next, I consulted with a lawyer about my options regarding the stolen money. Kyle, an attorney specializing in fraud cases, didn't sugarcoat the situation. You have strong evidence, he confirmed after reviewing my documents. But pursuing this legally means potentially seeing your brother's wife face criminal charges. Family cases like this are messy. Are you prepared for that? I considered his question carefully. Was I ready to potentially send Tiffany to jail? To create a permanent rift with my brother? The Morgan from a year ago would have hesitated, would have looked for any other solution to preserve family peace. But that Morgan was gone, replaced by someone who understood that family shouldn't mean accepting abuse. I'm prepared, I told Kyle. I want to pursue all available options. He nodded, respect evident in his expression. Then let's proceed. We'll start with a formal demand letter and go from there. While the legal process began, I focused on securing my digital life. I changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication on all accounts, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. I contacted my company's IT department and explained the situation. I need to ensure my work accounts are completely secure, I told Jason, my team lead. Someone with access to my computer has been impersonating me. Jason was horrified and immediately escalated the issue. Within days, my company had helped me establish entirely new security protocols and were investigating the breach themselves. "This is serious, Morgan," Jason said. "Identity theft impacts the company as well. We need to make sure nothing sensitive was compromised." His support was unexpected and deeply appreciated. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was taking the violation seriously rather than minimizing it. I secured a lease on the new apartment and began secretly moving my most important possessions when Ethan and Tiffany were out. My plan was to be completely moved before telling them I was leaving. I didn't trust Tiffany not to damage my things out of spite. Finding new furnishings while maintaining the appearance that nothing had changed was challenging. I ordered items to Leah's house and stored them in my new apartment during my secret trips there. I told my landlord I would not be renewing my lease, but asked him to keep it confidential until I gave notice myself. Throughout this process, I maintained a careful facade at home. I was polite but distant with both Ethan and Tiffany, giving them no reason to suspect I was planning my exit. Tiffany seemed to interpret my withdrawal as surrender and became increasingly smug. "I'm glad we're moving past all that unpleasantness," she said one evening, as if we'd resolved a minor disagreement rather than her systematic theft. I just nodded and retreated to my room, counting down the days until I could leave this toxic environment behind. The final confrontation came sooner than I'd planned. I overheard Tiffany on the phone, laughing about how she'd handled the situation. "She's totally backed down," Tiffany said to whoever was on the other end. I knew she wouldn't have the spine to follow through. Ethan always says she avoids conflict at all costs. Something in me snapped. I walked into the living room where she was lounging on the couch, my couch, and waited for her to notice me. When she did, the smirk faded from her face. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, ending her call quickly. "Long enough," I replied. "You think I've backed down? You think this is over?" She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Morgan. We all know you're not going to do anything. You don't want to hurt Ethan, and you certainly don't want the family drama." "You've never really known me," I said calmly. "If you did, you'd understand that betraying my trust was the worst thing you could possibly do." Something in my tone must have unsettled her, because she dropped the dismissive act. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done," I said. "I'm done with your manipulation, your theft, your lies. I'm done with being villainized for expecting basic decency. I'm just done." Tiffany's expression hardened. "What are you going to do? Kick us out? We've already established you don't have the guts for that." "No," I said. "I'm the one who's leaving." That caught her by surprise. "Leaving? This is your place." "Not for much longer. The lease isn't being renewed, and I've already found somewhere else to live." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile at her shocked expression. "Somewhere neither of you know about or have access to." She recovered quickly, her shock transforming into anger. "You can't just walk away. What about Ethan? What about our arrangement?" "What arrangement? The one where you steal from me and gaslight me when I object?" "That arrangement is definitely over." Our raised voices brought Ethan home from the garage where he'd been working. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "Your sister is abandoning us," Tiffany spat. "After everything we've done for her, she's just leaving us without a place to live." Ethan looked at me with confusion. "Morgan, I'm moving out," I confirmed. "And yes, that means you'll need to find another place when the lease ends next month. I've already informed the landlord." "But why?" he asked, genuinely bewildered. "I thought we were working things out."
"No, Ethan.
You decided that I should just forgive and forget being stolen from. That's not working things out. That's sweeping criminal behavior under the rug to avoid conflict." Tiffany stepped between us. "Stop trying to turn him against me. This is exactly what you've always done, playing the victim." "I don't need to play anything," I replied evenly. "The bank statements, the fraudulent emails, the diverted salary payments, they tell the truth without me saying a word." Ethan looked lost. "Morgan, please.
We can talk about this.
We can figure something out." For a moment, seeing his distress, I almost wavered. This was my big brother, my protector for so many years. But then I remembered how quickly he'd dismissed the severity of what Tiffany had done, how he'd expected me to just absorb the loss for family harmony. "There's nothing to figure out," I said firmly. "I've already decided. I'm leaving next week." "You can't do this to us," Tiffany shouted, her composure completely gone. "Where are we supposed to go? We don't have enough saved for deposits on a new place." The irony was staggering. "Maybe you should have thought of that before spending the $15,000 you stole from me," I suggested. "Stop interfering and leave the house," Tiffany screamed, her face contorted with rage. "Just get out now if you're so determined to ruin our lives." I looked at her coldly, then at my brother who stood there making no attempt to defend me or even acknowledge the absurdity of her accusations. "Okay," I said simply. "I'm gone." I walked to my bedroom, grabbed the pre-packed emergency bag I'd prepared for exactly this scenario, and walked out the front door, without looking back. "Morgan, wait." Ethan called after me, but I kept walking to my car. As I drove away, I felt an overwhelming mixture of emotions: grief for the relationship with my brother that would never be the same, anger at Tiffany's manipulation, but predominantly an unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time in months, I was taking control of my life again. "Okay, I'm gone," I whispered to myself as I drove toward Leah's house. "And I'm never looking back." The week I spent at Leah's house before moving into my new apartment was a blur of activity. I finalized the remaining details of my move, worked with Kyle on the legal proceedings against Tiffany, and steeled myself against the barrage of messages from Ethan and other family members. "You can't just block them all forever," Leah said gently as I silenced yet another call from my mother. "I'm not blocking them forever," I explained. "Just until I'm settled and strong enough to handle their guilt trips without wavering." The truth was I needed this clean break to find my footing again. Every message from Ethan oscillated between angry accusations and desperate pleas, making it clear he still didn't truly understand the gravity of what had happened. "They have 30 days before the lease ends," I told Leah. "That's plenty of time to find a new place if they actually try." On moving day, I strategically chose a time when I knew both Ethan and Tiffany would be out. He had a construction job. She had a job interview she'd mentioned during our last confrontation. I brought 2 friends and a small moving truck, and we efficiently cleared out my remaining belongings in under 3 hours. I left nothing behind except a manila envelope containing copies of all the evidence of Tiffany's theft, the lawyer's formal demand letter for repayment, and a note to Ethan. "I'm sorry it came to this. I never wanted to lose you, but I can't stay in a situation where my boundaries are violated and my concerns dismissed. The lease ends on the 30th. I've paid my portion through then. What happens next is up to you and Tiffany. Morgan." My new apartment felt like a sanctuary. Located on the 11th floor of a modern building with security features and a doorman who verified visitors, it represented safety in a way my old place never could again. I spent the first weekend arranging my furniture and setting up my home office, creating a space that was entirely mine. The legal process moved forward methodically. Kyle's demand letter to Tiffany specified the exact amount stolen, $15,642.87, provided evidence of the theft, and gave her 30 days to either repay the full amount or agree to a structured repayment plan. If she did neither, we would proceed with both civil action and formal criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. "Don't expect immediate results," Kyle warned me. "These cases often take time, especially when family is involved." I nodded, understanding that this wasn't about quick resolution but about standing my ground and ensuring there were consequences for Tiffany's actions. While the legal matters progressed, I focused on rebuilding my career momentum that had stalled during the household chaos. I threw myself into a major project at work, putting in extra hours and delivering results that impressed even our most demanding clients. Jason, my team lead, noticed the change. "Whatever was holding you back before seems gone," he commented during our one-on-one meeting. "Your work has always been good, Morgan, but now it's exceptional. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not constantly looking over your shoulder in your own home," I replied with a small smile. The company's investigation into the security breach Tiffany had caused concluded with several system-wide changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. More surprisingly, it led to a promotion for me. "We need someone who understands both the technical and human elements of security," the director explained when offering me the role of security implementation lead. "Your experience gives you unique insight into how these breaches can happen." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tiffany's betrayal had inadvertently advanced my career. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, which helped offset the financial loss from the theft. 3 weeks after moving out, I finally checked my personal email and found messages from nearly every family member. Most expressed confusion and concern, clearly having heard only Ethan and Tiffany's version of events. My mother's email was particularly painful. "I don't understand why you would abandon your brother when they need you most. Tiffany says you left them without any warning and they might become homeless. This isn't how we raised you, Morgan." Rather than responding individually to each distorted narrative, I composed a single, factual email detailing exactly what had happened, attached redacted copies of the evidence, and sent it to my entire family simultaneously. I ended with, "I love you all, but I will not allow myself to be stolen from, gaslight, and then villainized for protecting myself." I gave Ethan and Tiffany ample notice about the lease ending. What they choose to do with that information is their responsibility, not mine. The responses trickled in slowly: shock, apologies, and in some cases, continued defenses of Ethan and Tiffany. They made a mistake, but family forgives. I responded to each with the same measured tone, neither seeking approval nor engaging in arguments. Exactly 29 days after Kyle's demand letter was delivered, I received notification of a bank transfer for $5,000 with a message from Ethan. "First installment. We'll pay the rest monthly. This is from me, not Tiffany. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner." It was the first acknowledgement from either of them that accepted full responsibility for what had happened. I forwarded the information to Kyle, but didn't respond directly to Ethan. $5,000 was a start, but it didn't erase the betrayal or the months of gaslighting. 2 days later, my doorman called up to announce a visitor, Ethan. "I don't know how he found your address," the doorman apologized. "He says he's your brother." After a moment's hesitation, I agreed to meet him in the lobby rather than allowing him up to my apartment. Some boundaries needed to remain firm. Ethan looked terrible, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that hung loosely on his frame. He'd clearly lost weight. "Morgan," he said when he saw me, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for seeing me." "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, keeping my distance. "To apologize," he said simply. "Really apologize, not make excuses." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Tiffany and I broke up. Or rather, I told her to leave after I found out she was planning to take money from your replacement tenants too." I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "I was blind," he continued. "I didn't want to see what was right in front of me because it meant admitting I'd married someone who could do something so terrible. Especially to you." His voice cracked. "You took us in. You helped us when no one else would. And I repaid you by choosing her lies over your truth. Despite everything, seeing my brother in such distress hurt. But I'd learned my lesson about rushing to fix other people's problems." "Where are you staying now?" I asked. "With a buddy from work until I figure things out," he said. "The landlord gave us an extension when I explained the situation, but I'm looking for a small place I can afford on my own." I nodded. "I appreciate the partial repayment. And the apology." "It's not enough," he said quickly. "I know that. I'll pay back every cent, Morgan, even if it takes years." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke again. Do you think we can ever fix this? Be brother and sister again?" The question hung between us, weighted with decades of shared history and months of recent pain. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Not right away. Trust takes a long time to rebuild once it's broken." He nodded, accepting this without argument. "I understand. I miss my sister." For the first time since the whole ordeal began, I felt a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. I miss my brother too, I admitted. The one who always had my back. I want to be that person again, he said quietly. If you'll give me the chance someday. I didn't make any promises, but as we said goodbye, I felt the first tentative step toward a possible reconciliation in the distant future. Not forgiveness yet, but an opening where there had been only a closed door before. As I watched him leave, I realized how much I had changed. 6 months ago, I would have immediately tried to fix everything, to smooth things over regardless of the cost to myself. Now I understood that healthy relationships require accountability, respect, and time to heal when damaged. Setting my balance to zero didn't just mean cutting financial ties. It meant starting fresh with clear boundaries and the knowledge that I deserved better than what I had accepted before. 6 months after moving into my new apartment, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated when this ordeal began. My promotion had led to further career advancement, and I was now managing a team of developers focused on security implementation across the company's platforms. The salary increase had not only offset the financial loss from Tiffany's theft, but allowed me to rebuild my savings even stronger than before. My new home truly felt like a sanctuary. I decorated it exactly as I wanted, with no compromises for anyone else's taste or needs. The security features that had initially seemed like defensive measures now just felt like sensible precautions in an urban environment. I'd made friends with several neighbors and regularly joined the building's social events, expanding my circle beyond work colleagues and old connections. Ethan had faithfully sent monthly payments, slowly chipping away at the debt. We communicated primarily through brief, polite texts about practical matters, occasionally sharing minor life updates. The strained formality was a far cry from our once close relationship. Acknowledgement meant more than any grand apology could have. We both learned hard lessons, I said. As for Tiffany, she had faced consequences beyond our family circle. My company had pursued separate action regarding the impersonation and security breach, resulting in her being blacklisted from several industries. According to Ethan, she had moved back to her hometown, where her version of events likely painted her as the victim, but far from anyone who knew the truth. My relationship with other family members slowly mended as the full story became clear. My mother had been the hardest to convince, her maternal instinct to maintain family harmony initially overriding her ability to acknowledge the severity of what had happened. But eventually, she too came to understand that my boundaries weren't about being unforgiving but about protecting myself from further harm. "I'm proud of you, Morgan," she told me during a recent visit to my new apartment. "It took real strength to stand up for yourself the way you did." Perhaps the most profound change was in how I viewed myself and my relationships. Before this experience, I had equated generosity with allowing people unlimited access to my resources. I had confused conflict avoidance with kindness. I had believed that maintaining relationships at any cost was a virtue. Now I understood that healthy boundaries weren't selfish but necessary. That true generosity came from a place of choice, not obligation or manipulation. That sometimes walking away was the bravest and healthiest option. I installed a small decorative sign in my home office that read, "Your worth is not measured by what others can take from you." It served as a daily reminder of the lesson I'd learned at such a high cost. The financial wound had largely healed. Between Ethan's payments, my increased salary, and a small settlement from my company's insurance, I had recovered most of the stolen money. The emotional wound took longer, but with time and the help of my own therapist, I was finding peace. I no longer felt like a victim. I had taken back control of my narrative, my finances, and my relationships. I had set clear boundaries and stood by them even when it was painful. I had rebuilt my life on my terms. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over the city, my phone pinged with a message from Leah. "Remember when you thought your life was over because of what Tiffany did? Look at you now. Stronger, wiser, and free." She was right. The betrayal that had once seemed like it would define me had instead refined me. It had burned away illusions and left clarity in their place. It had shown me who I could truly count on and, more importantly, taught me that I could count on myself. The experience had cost me money, time, and certain relationships. But what I gained was invaluable. Self-respect, clearer boundaries, and the unshakable knowledge that I could survive betrayal and emerge stronger on the other side. For anyone watching who's facing a similar situation with family members taking advantage of your generosity, know that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Your kindness should be appreciated, not exploited. Your boundaries should be respected, not dismissed. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for protecting yourself doesn't have your best interests at heart. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining peace and standing up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming family betrayal and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more loyal than the family we're born into.